Join the Shot Talk Patreon at patreon.com/shottalk. You'll receive early access to videos, have the ability to submit questions to future guests, and more. Thanks and enjoy.
If you can find people that you trust and share an aesthetic vision, you can do so much more.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Shot Talk. This week I have my friend, the esteemed Antonio Piedra. Tony, thank you for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, man.
Dude, it's been a long time coming. So for folks at home, I want to give a quick little rundown of who you are and where you've come from. I know, well, it's funny because it's a little personal for me because we both started off in the same graduate program, which then led you to becoming a Pixar employee. And you did that for how many years?
Almost exactly 9 years.
Wow, almost 9 years.
Yeah.
And then from there, I know since I've known you, you always had this strong affinity towards, some very whimsical, imaginative, appealing stuff. And I remember once upon a time, you used to tell people, hey, you would give people the advice that I think you needed to hear. It was like, you should be a children's author. And lo and behold, like here you are, bona fide and everything. So yeah, tell us about The Greatest Adventure book. I'm very excited on a personal level.
No, thank you. So The Greatest Adventure is, I guess, my first foray as a solo artist. And so I wrote and illustrated it. And it's the best of me at like that point in my life. So the story is about a grandson who desperately wants to go on a real adventure, and his grandfather who thinks his real adventures have come to an end.
Okay.
But together, they realize that an adventure with someone you love can take place anywhere. And like finding that sentence, that single sentence to kind of describe and motivate what I do per
The mission
page.
statement.
It took forever. It was the hardest thing.
I remember because
I
I saw some of the writing process because you were sort of in the thick of it, and you showed me a version of it, and I thought that's pretty good, and I could tell that you were still searching for the core and for that sort of, like you said, that sentence. When you say this is the best of you, do you feel like this is a little bit autobiographical too, as a kid growing up?
It's so the way that like this book was born. I had just gotten an agent, and I can tell you about that too. But I had just gotten an agent, and she had encouraged me to fly out to New York to meet with 3 different editors. And basically introduce myself, but with like the nugget of a book, like she told me not to pitch the book. She told me the main goal is to introduce yourself and just kind of build a relationship and see whether one of these editors is someone you could foresee working with.
The long haul.
Yeah.
Wow.
And with one of the editors, we really hit it off. And so I felt comfortable enough to pitch him the book.
That's so funny.
Yeah. And long story short, he didn't like what I pitched him. But no, man, it ended up being like such like a thoughtful conversation, and like one that made me realize I'm talking to someone who understands story.
Great.
And at the very end, he asked me like, what motivated you to write the story that I pitched to him? And I told him a story from my childhood. And he was like, that's what you need to write about. And so I went back and worked for 10 months on a story that tried to capture the feeling that I had growing up in this landlocked big city, hearing stories about my dad's childhood in the Bahamas, with sharks and manta rays and turquoise seas, and longing for like having that same experience.
Finding legendary beasts and exploring the
Yeah.
elements, the
Yeah.
environments.
It had to be in the wild, like be it like a jungle, a wild river, the ocean, and it had to have dangerous animals. Because
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess that's just what I thought was cool, man. That's what I saw.
Well, dude,
as an
I
adventure.
remember on a personal level when we went hiking in Big Bend National Park. That was legitimately one of the most fun hiking experiences of my life because we probably should have broken a bone at some point. There was about 8 of us out there at the time, and yeah, you were always kind of pushing like, let's just go a little bit further, let's get a little bit riskier, but it made for such a fun time. And like I always think every now and then I think about that trip, and I'm like, man, that was a blast. But like Tony was definitely the rabble rouser in terms of like, come on, a little bit more. You know what I mean? So yeah, I feel like when I see themes of adventure and I see themes of like you said, the danger and the excitement, like I'm like, oh yeah, of course that's got to be Tony. Which then reminds me, because I know recently you went up to a sort of a secluded cabin in Canada, and then afterwards an island of literal grizzly bears afterwards. So we definitely talk about that.
So that grizzly bear one.
Yes.
That occurred right after like I left Pixar, or like the search for it occurred right after I left Pixar. And I was just thinking, it's like, okay, I'm no longer, stuck in one place. And there's some things that I've always been passionate about since I was like a little kid. And one of those things is, I don't know, seeing animals that can eat you. I don't know why, man. Sharks in particular.
Does it remind you that you're human?
I don't know.
That life is fragile. I don't know.
I have no idea, man. It's weird, like what you gravitate towards as a child. But I'm telling you, since I was 5 years old, I checked out one book from the library, and it was called Album of Sharks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I checked that out over and over and over again.
Yeah.
To the point where when I went looking for the book like 5 years ago, not knowing the title, not knowing the author, not knowing the illustrator, but I had a memory of every painting that was done in that book. Yeah. And I eventually found it after like searching on the internet for like 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It was that close to your
oh no,
formation.
I remembered every image. Yeah, so remembering that, like that passion is like a little kid, like thinking, oh, animals that can eat you are freaking cool. And
it's also just a boy thing, maybe. Just like monsters fighting in the bathtub.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. And there's real ones out there in the world.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
And then where these things exist are in like oceans and forests and rainforests in particular.
Yeah.
And so one day I literally Googled this. I was like, all right, I'm going to give myself a constraint. I want to go to the rainforest.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And so I Googled artist grant rainforest. And I was like, there's got to be somebody out there who wants an artist on some rainforest research project. And after a little bit of searching, I found this program called Voices of the Wilderness. Basically, it's a program in Alaska that tries to pair artists in the United States with remote locations in Alaska with the hopes that by bringing artists out there, they'll then come back and tell like the populace that these places need to be protected.
Worth preserving.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
And the reason why like this grant came up with my Google search is because one of the locations is the largest contiguous temperate rainforest in the world, which crosses like southeast Alaska and into British Columbia. And it's called the Tongass Forest.
And so it's considered a rainforest.
Yeah, so it's a temperate rainforest.
Temperate rainforest.
So it rains 290 days out of the year there.
Dude, that's crazy.
Yeah.
200 days.
Yeah, 290 days out of the year.
That's a whole year. Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. And on top of the temperate rainforest, it has the highest density population of grizzly bears.
Grizzly bears. So you were like, sign me the fuck up. I'm there.
Yeah. And there are no barriers in this location that I'm at. This is a space where the management style is that humans are not meant to impede the behavior of these bears. We're just there to observe them. And these bears have been conditioned in the sense that they've been observing humans, watching them from 2 specific locations in this park. So us humans are meant to be predictable. We walk 2 trails to 2 viewing areas, and the bears expect humans to walk on these trails and to observe them from like these spots.
Okay.
But beyond those constraints, you as an individual in this space have to realize that bears go everywhere.
Okay.
And you see signs of them everywhere. There was this 1-mile trail that you have to do by yourself, or I had to do by myself, into this temperate rainforest.
Did you stay on the trail, Tony?
I stayed
Okay,
on
I was gonna say,
I stayed on the trail.
I'm starting to have memories of Big Bend. I'm like, Tony.
No, man. I stayed on the trail. I was like, I had no idea how to react if I saw a bear.
Yeah.
They guided me a little bit, but still, man, there's a very big difference between intellectualizing what someone tells you and then knowing how you're going to react when you actually see
actually
one by
happens.
yourself.
Yeah, that's a lot of life, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the longest 1-mile hike I had ever done. And the closer I got to like this viewing area, which is like this 30-foot tower that you climb up into, and then it overlooks a stream where the bears fish. But as you got closer and closer, you'd see evidence of the bears crisscrossing this human trail. I mean, you'd see their poop, and you can see what they ate, man.
Oh, wow.
And I took photographs of it. I was like, oh, you ate a fish?
I was going to say like fish bones. And,
yeah, like right in there. Oh, there's the tail. Oh, you just ate berries. Sucks for you. But yeah, and then you'd see like swaths of like these plants that look like giant cabbages, but squished. Inside the forest, just completely flattened, man. So that you'd think like almost like a dinosaur had just like walked across, like the space.
Oh my God.
And so when like that first time I walked through it, I'm ignorant as to what I'm about to see.
And you see this big depression and you think, good Lord, what the hell was this before?
And it makes it so clear that these animals that you're going to see are actively moving across like this little trail that you're walking on.
Yeah, people, you don't think about that, the foreshadowing of something like that. That's ominous, but exciting, I guess.
It was my favorite part.
Yeah. Of course, yes.
No, because actually when I saw my first bear, I think it was kind of clumsy.
The bear.
Yeah. I had just made it to the top of the tower. I'm just kind of reflecting on like this feeling of like anticipating King Kong. Yeah.
Yes.
And then I hear this animal, or just hear like a rustling from kind of behind me. And I turn around in the tower and I look down and I see this bear kind of like trundling out. And she walks through like this kind of like dammed up area. Like there's a beaver nearby, and it's still water, like a little swamp. And it's funny, like she like crawls in, but like almost looking like she doesn't even want to touch the water. And every chance that she gets, she tries to climb out of this little dam and get up onto anything that was dry. And so, I don't know, man, just watching her move and just observing her behavior, and maybe I'm, anthropomorphizing her. It was just the far opposite of what I was imagining as I had walked through the trail. And that was just kind of interesting.
You thought that she felt more like was emoting human tendencies versus...
It just wasn't something scary.
Right, that's what I mean. You're imagining this beast, this almost cold, soulless monster, and you saw her struggle, you saw her sort of, like you said, not wanting to get into the water, and you almost saw a person in there, right? Like
observing like that behavior. I don't know, it was just interesting just kind of seeing something that just felt a lot more benign than the ideas that we have of these animals. Yeah.
Right, yeah. That's nice to hear, because I think, in the line of work that we do, where very often artists like to anthropomorphize different, even just inanimate objects. That there's I guess with certain levels of intelligence in the animal kingdom, like there is a lot that we actually do end up having in common with different animals, and sometimes it's like it's closer to life than we realize. So that's cool. That's cool that you saw that side of the big scary monster.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you were up in the tower at that point. That was before you had before that.
Yeah, that was before I had like the bear come really close to me.
Yeah. It was a different bear. I guess.
This was a different bear. Yeah. That bear, I don't know, man. Like at that point, I had already been on the island for 5 days, and because nothing horrible has happened to me,
Just getting a little confident.
I was ready for that bear just to like come walk by, brush past me, and then like enter the forest.
Wow, so you were already in that
calm.
frame of mind.
I was very calm, man. And I don't know if that's just being, dumb, and it might be, but she wasn't moving like any sort of threatening posture, and it just felt like she just knew that she wanted to get there, and I was there, and she was just going to walk by.
Wow.
But the ranger that I was sitting with, she stood up, and she's like, "No, Ruby, no."
Wow. Yeah, imposing herself. Yeah.
Yeah, because technically that's what's called an encounter, when like a bear like crosses like the boundary between what is acceptable between the two species.
So they're training the bears in the wilderness to know that humans are not gonna be okay with that during these encounters.
No, it's almost like even like a bear interacting with another bear. There's like a point where like that, if there's two stranger bears, they all have their own like personal boundaries.
Wow.
So you're almost just kind of behaving like another animal there.
Wow.
Where
Okay.
basically it's like, hey, you just crossed a boundary that I'm not comfortable with, and then you're just kind of like emoting that like, don't do that.
This is not okay.
Yeah. And other bears do that too. All bears do that with each other.
Okay.
As well.
Wow.
And so I think it's a similar interaction. And so Ruby just turned around and went another way. But like the ideal situation is like that interaction never even occurs.
Yeah.
Between a human and a bear.
It doesn't have to come to that.
Yeah. During that time out there, like one is like the purpose of kind of like recharging and reconnecting with like these like passions that I had as a kid. But then subconsciously like wondering whether like there's a story that I can tell like out there.
Yeah. Well, now that you're sort of in the business, this being your first published work, I'm sure that'll help inform. I'm guessing that's going to be a theme that comes up. I'm just guessing from knowing who you are, that's going to be, definitely something that probably informs future work. And it's funny how that is, because I think in the writing process, it's a matter of not forcing things out, but sort of organically, hopefully ideas kind of organically come forth. Yeah. And so that's cool that it's filling the tanks, I mean, that way. Did you see the film The Revenant?
Yeah.
Okay. Had you seen it before or after the trip?
I saw it before.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I watched the attack scene again before. And I watched
specifically just that scene?
Just the attack scene and Grizzly Man.
Tony, you're hilarious. That's great. It's funny. I actually did go back and watch that scene again, just because I thought technically it was amazing. But the difference is I did not go to a rainforest afterwards and hang out with bears. That's I didn't do that. What I was going to ask you about next was I remember this was a different trip though, right? When you went to that cabin for that artistic. Okay. I'll let you tell the story, but from the impression that I got is you basically went to a dojo in the middle of the woods, and there was an art instructor there who was like the stereotypical old kung fu master who mistreated his students, but at the end of the whole experience, you feel like you got something out of it, right? Like that's.
Yeah. Like.
So this is a different trip altogether.
Yeah, so this is out on the outskirts of Montreal.
Okay.
Yeah, so out in Canada. towards the end of winter, everything's still covered in snow.
Yeah.
And it is a cabin, totally isolated location.
And how did you find this out? Like, did you do the same thing? You just Google searched art, isolated art experiences?
So I was still at Pixar at the time, and I was just looking for something to prove to myself that I was going to invest in my new career as an independent artist.
Wow.
I had already decided like I was going to leave the studio, but I was still anxious about my prospects as an independent artist, and I wanted to invest in the idea of me being a part of the studio, apart from a studio for the first time in my life.
Well, that's a hell of a way to try that out. Yeah. After doing a 9 to 5 on a set routine for that many years. Yeah.
Yeah. And Pixar was awesome because they supported me and they gave me permission to
take leave.
To take the leave and actually go do this. I think I was on Coco at the time. And so, yeah, they let me, dedicate this month to like my future career, and they knew like that I was leaving the studio.
Well, that's very gracious of them.
It was so supportive, man.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I went out in this cabin, and for a month, just painted digitally, but painted nonetheless.
And it was you and several other artists, right, in this setup. So
yeah,
it
me
was
and
all
two other artists and an instructor.
You guys volunteered to go and have this, I guess, art camp, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was tough. Like, I butted heads with the professor a bit. These are personality differences and expectations. We didn't always see eye to eye, but like I think at the end of the day, like that experience convinced me that I was going along the right path. Because like I had been doing the same job at Pixar for like 9 years.
Yeah.
And I believed in myself that I could do something more. And I wanted to do something more.
And at any point you could have left, right? Or once you were there, you were locked in.
I mean, you could leave, but
yeah. So maybe it was for you. It was sticking to it and seeing it to the very end, and coming out of the other side with that sense of I stuck it through and I got good results out of it, and that this is a.
The other thing, man, like that really showed me that I felt like I was doing the right thing was that even though like it wasn't always the most pleasant experience, like painting at the cabin, I was still more fulfilled with the work that I was doing than when I returned to Pixar.
Gotcha. On a personal gratification level,
I was
right?
learning like that. That was the cool thing. I was learning, and all the time that I was dedicating was dedicated towards my growth as an artist.
Yeah, I think that's so essential for creatives that it's hard to find once you're in the industry. It's funny because in school that's all you do, and you sort of get a little exhausted and fatigued over it. But the minute that's gone, your soul feels like it starts to shrink a little bit, which I think is that whole corporate, weight that a lot of people feel sometimes. Because you just kind of stagnate, and so that must have been pretty exhilarating to discover that again, to feel that, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's just like, man, as artists, you just need a balance. I think you need to be able to grow, but then also practice those skills. And I think once you're in a large studio, you're hired for a specific skill that maybe you haven't like mastered it yet, but you're pretty good at whatever you're being hired into. And then I think for like a 2 or 3 year period, you are still learning, you're learning really specifically. But then there comes like a point where like that begins to plateau, and then you start looking for like something else.
Sure. Yeah.
And a lot of people like that I work with, you know, they fulfill themselves by having really passionate hobbies outside of work.
I've noticed that in the industry, sometimes you find people who are hardcore dedicated, you know, medieval battle reenactors with very elaborate costumes, or they're kind of thrill seekers. They go kayaking and white water rafting, but yeah, they kind of sort of fill in that need, you know, that mental need to push themselves, right? Yeah. If you can't find it in your work, right? Yeah. Would you say that you did learn a lot though about, I guess, in a professional sense, like working with other artists and knowing how to get better results with people in that way, that maybe Pixar taught you, that No Other Place taught you? Do you think that helped anyway in that regard?
I definitely I learned some valuable things while I was at Pixar, tangential to like what I was doing, or like not related, tangential to the work I actually did, but completely related to the work that's done at Pixar. But like specifically with like working with others, I mean, where I really learned that was in grad school.
Yeah.
And I don't think I relearned that at Pixar.
Okay.
Because it's a lot less collaborative, the work, or at least my work was. You know, as a set dressing artist.
I gotcha.
Or working as a TD, you know, it's like you're given a problem, you know, and you tackle that problem. You have to interact like a little bit, but you know, it's like at the front end, at the back end.
I gotcha.
But the bulk of the work, you know, it's just like, okay, you know, this is your bit, do that bit, you know.
Right.
But like in grad school, man, what I learned is that if you can find people that you trust and share an aesthetic vision, you can do so much more. Yeah.
I feel that something that I've learned along the years is that through the same grad program that we had, and the same thing doing the professional work, and now you know, doing my own side projects, is that when you find someone that you click and you have shared values, you have shared visions and aesthetics, you don't need you don't need a giant machine to produce really high-end polished work. It's just having a few good men who are all on the same page and you know, leading the charge if you have to, and getting to the destination without, you know, I think maybe some of the large company inefficiencies that sometimes happen. So, and I know for you, that was, I always, because you were a year before I was, and I always saw you as that guy who sort of knew how to sort of, you know, rally the troops and work on something that was, I always felt like you were trying to, I don't know, push things, and things were always coming from a pretty sincere place and very inspired. And so I tried to when it was our class's turn to do that, I always felt like you passed on the baton to me when it was my turn to like do the summer project specifically. Yeah. So let's talk about Pixar a little bit, because I remember back when we were at the program, that was you know, what's the word I'm looking for?
The end all be all?
Yeah, it was the Mount Olympus. Yeah. It was Valhalla. It's like, you have arrived at the paradise, the ultimate place. And I remember that everybody was going for Pixar at the time, but anybody would be happy if they ended up at DreamWorks or Blue Sky or Sony. Yeah. But I remember that you got in, and holy moly, like I remember being really excited, but then for two, it was like, man, what is that even like? That must be crazy. So you were one of the few who made it through the iron gates of Pixar.
That was the only company I got an offer from.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah.
Like I applied to Real Effects and DreamWorks. And in addition, like the timing that I came in was in 2008, where Pixar was consciously trying to expand the company from a studio, I think, of 1,000 people to 1,250.
It's very specific. Okay.
Yeah, because they had the goal of no longer producing just one film every, what was it? Were they doing one per year?
It felt about one every
or 18
every
months.
couple years. Yeah, 18 months or so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of pressure that performs.
Yeah, so they wanted to produce 3 films every 2 years.
Wow. Okay.
And so they increased the studio with like that goal in mind. And so I think I was just really lucky with the timing, man.
Yeah.
And so I think timing plays like a huge role as to like whether you get a job or not. It's like having the skill set and then
having the talent, but then also hoping that you get that they're what you're looking for at the time, and that they're in a hiring frenzy or what have you. Yeah, I will say the one thing that when I did visit you, and I remember hanging out with you in Emeryville and hanging out with all those colorful characters that you got to know over there. I will say that it felt like Pixar really knew. I mean, you go to any animation studio and you'll have everybody you need to get the production done. But it felt like I would talk to, somebody who was an R&D or somebody who was an animator or somebody who was an effects artist, but they themselves, and I don't know if it's because you attracted these people personally, but it felt like they were just the most interesting, quirky, weird, smart people I'd ever run into. And I don't know, that's everyone who I met through you at Pixar was like, man, that guy, yeah, he was a layout guy, but holy moly, like this guy, X, Y, and Z, list out all the crazy things that this person used to do. And it felt like, I don't know if like Pixar did that on purpose or not, but they always got some real interesting characters to work for them. Because I think about Danny and I'm thinking about all those guys, so yeah.
Danny in particular.
Yeah, well, him in particular. Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's probably a combination of both.
Yeah.
I think I gravitate towards like maybe a little bit more eccentric individuals.
I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you. Yeah.
You should, man. I don't know, man. I think to be a little weird is awesome.
Yeah. I think for artists, that's we get. I don't know. I speak for myself, anyways. Where I tend to get bored pretty easily. Like I was always the kid in school when assigned cheating was the worst, because that meant that you always had to have the same perspective on the classroom. And like the one time out of the year when everybody switched it up, that was the greatest day for me, because all of a sudden I was sitting on this side of the room and all of a sudden the whole world was brand new and everything looked different. And I don't know, I've always operated that way. And yeah, I like, and also my upbringing with internet animation, specifically on Newgrounds, that's what I loved. It was like, it felt like opening up a toy box and being like, what's in here now? Like, oh my God, this is so far left field and this is so different. And yeah, I think that sort of, it's like, I hunger for weird and different and interesting, you know what I mean? So I think a lot of artists do anyways. So.
Yeah, it makes the world colorful.
Yeah, it's like spice, right? Yeah, it makes it fun.
Yeah, but like if we want to talk about like my Pixar experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, so I get there, I go through the residency program. They offer me a job at the end. I accept it, and everything's great. And I have like this mentality that I've made it, and so for the first time in my life, like I didn't have a new goal.
Because you hit the top.
Well,
personally at the time.
Yeah, I reached what like I thought the goal was. Like when you're in undergrad, grad school, I don't know, there's always something kind of clear to kind of move towards next.
And school gives you that. It gives you that sort of that attainable goal if you work hard enough, right?
Yeah.
Like leveling up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have on my calendar, I believe like if you write something down, like there's a good chance it's going to happen.
Sure, yeah.
And so I had like Pixar 2007. I was like, okay, I'm going to get there. And then it's like, then it became 2008. But, eventually like it happened, and that was like the goal. But then after being in the studio for a little while, it was realizing, and it took a little bit to realize it. It's like, oh man, I don't have like another goal. I can move up through leadership, and and the work becomes more managerial as you proceed. And I looked at the people in those positions and what they were doing, and and then I asked myself, do I really want to do that? And I'd only want to do it just for the experience of like maybe leadership, but like as an artist, there wasn't like another path.
Opportunity for growth, like you said. Yeah.
And so searching for a new goal, I found was like that next hard step. And it's because like I wanted a new goal.
Yeah. And I remember too, because you thought about maybe trying to transfer into the art department, but Pixar, I mean, that's a pretty difficult transition. And I think that's something that people, that I was pretty naive about when I first joined DreamWorks is, you think you get there and it's not as though, I mean, the people running the machine like to keep all the cogs sort of where they're supposed to be. Right. So I remember it must have been the second week for me. And, I enjoyed what I was doing well enough, but I remember telling the recruiter, I said, hey, is there any chance that I can try some story stuff? And I just saw this look of despair and dread come over her face saying, why would you want to leave the job that you just got? And I said, oh, it's not that I'm not enjoying it. I just think, eventually I bet you I could do that. I bet that's something that if I was given a shot. But I remember putting off a lot of people by simply even entertaining that thought. And I feel like you probably, maybe in a similar way, when you were talking about going from set dressing to art, like there was a lot of forces that were working against you that way, right?
No, I was so naive, man.
Yeah.
I was like you, just delayed. Like
yeah. A little too excited, probably. Yeah.
The reason why I felt so positive is because I was working on Up as an intern.
Yeah.
I'd been brought in as a sets modeling intern.
Yeah.
And the modeling work ran out. And then one of the leads that I was working with, she was the lead for set dressing. I went up to her and I was like, I'd like to try set dressing. And she was so open to it. She was like, okay, come on, we've got work.
Yeah.
And so I did set dressing then for the next 6 months.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
And then I got a modeling credit on Up. And I was like, at that point, I felt more proud of my set dressing work than my modeling work.
And you're like, what the hell?
And I was like, can I get a set dressing and a modeling credit? And they're like, no, you have to choose one.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I chose set dressing.
Wow.
And I did not realize that I just put myself in a bucket.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
So from there on out, for all casting, I was considered a set dresser. And so after I finished Up, this is where it throws off all the people who were assigning, who were dealing with casting. They're called the DTA, Director of Technical Artists. So I was like, okay, I want to do layout now. And then,
this Tony guy.
That's probably what they're thinking. But I'm like, oh, this is great. They let me do sets modeling, then they let me do set dressing. Of course they're gonna let me do layout. Right. And you know what? They did.
What?
They did.
Okay.
They put me on Mark Walsh. Do you know Mark Walsh?
Oh man, I've heard the name. He's not an animator, is he?
Yeah, so Mark Walsh
He's an animator.
Yeah, so he was one of the best animators at Pixar, and he had been promoted to director. And one of the first directing gigs they gave him was doing some promotional videos for Toy Story. And in anticipation, I think, for Toy Story 3 to come out. And I was placed on his Toy Story promo project as the one and only layout artist with zero training. Him as a first-time director, okay? No one told him that I had never done this before.
That you were the new guy. Yeah.
I stupidly told him, I've never done this before, Mark. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And man, he was so cool. He let me do it for a month. And then they brought in a real seasoned layout artist. But during that month, I felt like I was finally getting a groove. They had me present my work to the director of photography for Wall-E, and he looked over and he was like, "Oh no, okay, this is what Tony should be doing. He's capturing the shots." But I don't know. I was pulled off the project.
Yeah.
And then I got into this situation at Pixar where I wasn't being casted on any projects. And what I ended up finding out after talking to a couple of my leads was that basically people were under the impression that I didn't want to do sets modeling or set dressing anymore.
Okay.
And that I wanted to look into layout. And basically I got into this weird vortex where people just basically didn't know what
They didn't know where to put
They didn't
you.
know how to cast me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that I feel like we're kindred spirits in that way because I think we get excited about trying different things and I guess in our idealized world we could have done any job that they had for us, but that's not how the machine works at all. So then you're sort of put into this do not know where to place bucket, and then how long did that last, or how did
it lasted 6 months.
6 months? Okay.
Yeah. And in those 6 months, I realized like you can't just walk into any department and express like a genuine interest.
Yeah.
I mean, so many people are gonna listen to this and they're like, "Duh."
Well, you'd be surprised because I think I mean, I did it. You know, I think a lot of people, there's expectations and there's reality, and I think for anybody who wants to get into art, they have to. I think this kind of information is good because, chances are you're gonna do, if you're at a sizable studio, you're gonna do one thing over and over and over again because they're gonna need that one thing. Yeah. So you have to ask yourself, what size studio do you want to go in? Because if you're going into a place that has 15 people, then you're probably going to be doing layout and you're going to be doing set dressing and you're going to be doing a lot of different things. So I guess that has to be a personal choice of what kind of job you want, or what size company you want to join, right? So I mean, we're both young and we're both new and we're both excited to try stuff. So
So I don't know, careers are interesting.
Yeah. Well, what's great though is that I think all those disciplines that you were expressing interest in, because you did a lot of traditional painterly things when you were in school. You got obsessed a little bit with composition. And I feel like all those different elements that you sort of exercised and learnt about, they all sort of lend themselves now to children's illustrate, or like the what you're doing now, right? Like that all informs Tony, like you now, you know what I mean? Which is good.
Totally. Like I mean, when I illustrated this book, I definitely come at it from as if I'm drawing a camera.
You're still thinking about
100%. Like I think of them as shots. And I'm thinking about, okay, where am I placing this camera to tell the moment that I want to tell? And obviously I have like the limitation that it's not time-based, so it's you got to do it in like a single image. And there's no sound. And so I'm really focusing on like how to use composition and lighting to, I don't know,
express a certain feeling.
Yeah. Like one thing that like I've learned while doing this is that if you can create an image which like emotionally connects with your audience, you can forgive a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is something that I love bringing up is because films are the same way. If you can get an audience member emotionally invested in the movie, you don't have to have every loose end tied up, even narratively speaking, because you've already kind of got them. It's almost like an illusionist. Like if you can sort of get the person watching you to focus on what you want off the bat, then they can get away with the blemishes or their secrets that you don't even notice because you're already into it. You're already focusing. So that's cool that translates over with what you're doing and that you think about that. That's crazy. So do you feel like that's something that you discovered with this first book?
You know what? I discovered it in two ways. So one, I feel like I was discovering it while I was at Pixar. I think had I not gone to the studio, I was always in love with the image and the idea of building a world. But I think just being in the culture of the studio with that mantra that story comes first.
Story.
Yeah, story. Yeah.
Yeah.
And whatever you think about that mantra is what it is. But at its root, I think, is this idea: if you can emotionally connect with your audience, you win.
Yes.
And so I feel I learned that there, but then that was reinforced on one of the first ventures that I took to show my illustrations to the public.
Yeah.
I had my work seen by a group of children's book editors, and it was just one of my images, just one illustration was flashed on screen for a panel of 5 editors, and their job was just to react to the image. Wow. And so this was one of 15 pre-selected images.
Yeah.
And it was an image of a boy with a backpack jumping into the ocean and 4 fish kind of swimming away, and he's got this big smile on his face. And it's so funny because one of the panelists became my editor for The Greatest Adventure. But his reaction to the image was I don't get it. Is this boy committing suicide? But he's so happy. The fish are running away from him or swimming away from him.
Right.
And I don't know, just watching their reactions to everybody's image, it's just sharpened or reinforced this idea that a single image, even if it's part of a larger context, still needs to be able to clearly emotionally engage.
Grab you.
Yeah, and in the specific way that you intended.
That you were going for, yeah. I've always heard, I like the analogy that a good filmmaker, a good artist, because we work with but we studied under some pretty kooky art professors when we were in grad school. And I remember the analogy of how, every magnet, or it's if you have a piece of iron or metal and there's it's been a while since I've taken a chemistry and a physics class, but it's whatever molecule controls the polarity of a piece of metal, but how a good filmmaker, they take a piece of iron and they stick a magnet on there, and all of a sudden everything gets flipped to point towards the positive or the negative, and it's all very deliberate. And what you don't want is every little molecule to be I believe they're electrons. Anyways, you want the polarities to point a certain way on purpose, not to have this jumbled mess of positive and negatives. You know what I mean? And I feel I think that's one of the reasons that I think abstract art or stuff that's a little weird and postmodern doesn't speak, I guess, to guys like us, because we understand the power of specificity, and the filmmaker or the artist was going for something very on purpose, and that's a success when people respond the way you're hoping that they respond, right? That's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's knowing your medium.
Right.
It's you used every bit of visual information that you have to express some idea.
Right.
Yeah. And you've layered that in a really conscious way to kind of express that.
Yeah, it's on purpose, and it's working that way. Well, Tony, thanks for being on the show, man, and always good talking to you. I'm glad that you got to share some of your insane experiences out in the wilderness, and sort of what you've taken from your corporate job, and now how that's kind of thrusting you into this next phase in your life, which is really exciting, man. It's an adventure, right? So Yeah, thanks for sharing, man. It's been cool.
Thanks for having me
Yeah.
on, man.
Absolutely. Well, that'll be it for this week in Shot Talk, and we will see you guys next time.
If you like this episode of Shot Talk and would like to see more episodes in the future, join the Shot Talk Patreon at patreon.com/Shot Talk. You'll get access to private Discord servers, Q&A opportunities for the guests, and more.
Shot Talk would also like to thank the following patrons for their generous contributions.
Also, if you're enjoying these beats, you can follow me at jetsy.bandcamp.com. Thanks, and see you next time.